listen.
Drag that out, listen. Because
if you don't listen to people, then you can't listen to yourself.
Ooh, you can't listen to yourself. So say more about that, because I mean, you can't just drop the mic and leave that there. I need you to unpack that a little bit for me.
If you think that you're better than everyone else and you don't listen to anyone, then how do you know that's your true self?
Come on. So it's kind of like people can be mirrors for you too when you're in a relationship, and people can reflect back maybe some things you don't like about yourself. And if you're not listening, you can't learn and grow and evolve and become a better human being. Ooh, that is, sometimes I feel like you just dropped the super deep stuff as a 10-year-old that I don't know if people are picking up on. So I'm going to have to unpack that later because that's good.
Welcome to Living in 3D Power. Discover your truth, discern your path, determine your power. I'm Dr. Amber Sessoms, and together, let's unlock our power, build authentic connections, and foster collective liberation. Happy Women's History Month, y'all. We are in it. We are going to keep celebrating not just this month, but every month. And today, Emma and I are going to kick it off for episode 8, talking about authentic leadership. And I think it's so important that this topic is coming up in this moment during Women's History Month, because we need to really focus that women are, in fact, phenomenal leaders. And it's also really coinciding with me still riding this high from our National Association of School Psychologists conference, when a group of amazing Black women leaders in school psychology, moi being one of them, we actually presented at our national conference on this very topic and talked about our intersecting identities and how there are barriers to having access to moving up in leadership within school psychology, and also what we can do about that and how we can build community and really leverage the expertise within our field and sisterhood that we can develop as Black women. And I tell y'all, if there was ever a moment of sisterhood, it was at this conference. It was a beautiful homecoming in a field that is overwhelmingly underrepresenting Black women. And to have a room filled of Black women practitioners was, I feel it through my body. It just reverberates through my body because it was life-giving. And it was just such a blessing to be in community with so many women who look like us and such a small percentage of us within the field, but so many people coming up to us then and still to this day and saying how they felt seen, heard, and valued, and how we helped them to name some of the language and some of the experiences they're facing. And that's the part of community. When we center people that have been pushed to the margins and give them space and honor the wisdom that they have, we learn a different level of discourse. And this was such a big part of my doctoral journey and my research, because that discourse is transformative. So when we're in community, when we're having conversations, and we might have that tip of the tongue issue that happens oftentimes, being in community is going to say, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I feel. I just didn't know what to call it. And I watched that happen in real time during our presentation. Particularly, there's one early career practitioner was weeping. She was crying and trying, I could see her. She was just wiping her tears, trying to keep herself together. She walked out for a moment to gain her composure, and she came back in. And she just couldn't contain herself, and she just wept. So after we were done, I just walked up to her and I embraced her. And that's what she was saying. I didn't know what to call it, and you gave me the words. And part of the language that our group helped them to identify is this pet to threat phenomenon that a lot of women, particularly Black women, face when, this is very true of me, right? I'll say the thing, I will name it, I will say it in the room, but it's often not well received, because oftentimes we bring people, especially after the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. We did this whole push for DEI, and now we're in the backlash. But for this whole push, what we did was we saw all these people rising up all these positions for DEI, all these different levels of representation because we focus really on the D in DEI, which is diversity. And I talked about that last week, which just is. And when we just focus on that and we don't move towards equity and inclusion and justice, what happens is when I bring you into the boardroom or I put you in this quote unquote leadership position, I expect you to just play the game. I don't want you to change the culture. I just want you to be the good look. But what has happened is because particularly Black women, we have these intersecting identities. And because we come up from a tradition of organizers, of movement workers, of truth tellers, we will unapologetically name the issues, the systemic issues. And in particular for school psychologists, we're trained in looking at a systems level analysis. So it becomes problematic in our field, even when we're naming the issues that everyone knows to be true. We're data formed decision makers. But when we do it within our Black bodies, within our Black female bodies, it becomes a threat. So when the backlash comes, that's when you don't get the advancements. That's when you're getting pushed out. And it is harmful. And it happens so often that even in that room, so many women from different levels, if they were grad students to early career to, been in the field 20, 30 years, they could all identify with that. So these are the things in particular that need to be discussed when I think about Emma. And because she's so unapologetic about living in her truth and she's so aligned with her strength of fairness, that having these conversations with her to understand things of pet the threat or things of how do you speak your truth in a world that wants to stomp it out, building her up and helping her find community for her to be able to do that is going to be so key because it is, again, tradition of Black womanhood. And also at the same time, understanding that we cannot be the only truth bearers. How do we build community with other people? Not everyone that even looks like us, but from different identity groups that can echo and that can stand in the gap. Because y'all, we're into that NAT ministry right now, right? If you're not familiar with NAT ministry, just Google it. Tricia Hersey, thank you for that work because you are reminding me, even in this moment, to rest. And it can be hard for me to take off that Black woman, superwoman cape, but I'm constantly reminding myself to do that. And I thank my village for reminding me of that as well. When I'm like, oh, I'm fine. When there's issues that are going on, I can handle it. And I have to give myself permission to say, it's not okay. I need to rest. And I'm going to let someone else take that, or I need a break, or can we reschedule that meeting? And all of those things are okay. So shout out to my community, my beloved community that has my back, that checks in and says, let's reschedule. How are you doing? And all the things. So with all that said, still riding that high, still really honored to have presented with these phenomenal Black female leaders. And as I continue to cultivate that within my own girls, talking with Emma about this is just going to be a real treat for y'all today because y'all, when I say that she dropped some gems that I am literally working with adults to figure out, getting contracts and working as a consultant with leaders to develop the skills and insight that Emma has at age 10. It just blew my mind, some of the things she said today. So stay tuned for that because I'm hoping that you can harvest that wisdom and use it in your own leadership and use it in your own organizations to help you be a more inclusive and just leader. And in particular, the things that keep coming up for me that I'm wondering about in this moment based off of the conference, based off the conversation with Emma, and some of the things that I was thinking in this conversation was, who gets to lead? So thinking about the systems that are in place, who do we see typically in leadership positions? We all know who that is. Who gets to lead and who gets to feel like they belong in powerful spaces? Who has to push themselves into that room and tell themselves that they belong? Who has to do that extra level of gassing themselves up, of telling themselves it is okay if they are going to make these comments about me? I know my worth and I know my truth, and you have to look yourself in the mirror when the world is looking down on you. It is women. It is people that are coming from intersecting identities, visible identities that are not well respected in this society. But We are doing the work on this podcast in conversation with Emma, just in our daily walk, to say every one of us is a leader and every one of us deserves to lead authentically and to cultivate spaces where that can happen. But I really hope that you enjoy this conversation with Emma, because I wanted to focus on leadership, representation, and community, and what it means to her from her young Black girl perspective and all the strengths that she has, especially thinking about fairness and love and that sense of justice that Emma has. What does that mean coming from this 10-year-old lens? So I hope you glean these nuggets and enjoy the session with Emma.
It's me, it's me, it's me. It's me, it's me, it's me. Hi, it's me, Emma. Welcome back to Living in 3D Power, and today we are going to talk about leadership.
Such an important topic, and who better than talk about leadership with than one of the most phenomenal young leaders that I know, Ms. Emma Sessoms. Unapologetically a leader, just a natural, right? Yeah. And I think back to when I did Junior Achievement with you. Remember last year I came in and volunteered, and we had that one session where it was you worked collaboratively with the group and you all assumed these roles, or did I assign you roles? I can't remember which, but
You assigned the roles.
Assign the roles which you were able to pick as a group which role would work for you. And I thought it was such a cool experiment at such a young age to see how y'all had to collaborate together, because I do that work a lot with adults, and let me tell you, it doesn't work out as nicely as it worked out with your group. Yeah, adults have some things to work on about leadership and collaboration and shared ownership. So I want to talk to you about that today, because I think you might have some wisdom for our listeners, young and old. So the first question I want to ask you is, have you ever been in a space where you felt like you were the only one who looked like you? How did that make you feel?
I haven't felt like that before.
Okay, I'm making a face, y'all, because we said before, I think it was last episode or the episode before, that we are in a district that's only 1.8% Black. So I really expected you to say, oh yeah, every day. Every day I feel like that. And now you're making a face where you just gave me one eyebrow up. So why don't you feel that way then?
Because I know who I am, and I have friends that support me, and that they don't make me feel different.
Ooh, I love that. So there's two things you said. I know who I am, and my friends support me. They don't make me feel any different. And I think you hit the nail on the head the first part, because you know how we worked before through what are your strengths? And you were always like, I already knew what these were, even before the assessment. But again, there's so many people in this world that don't know what their strengths are, or what their values are, or what they need in life to make them feel fully human. And you're making a face again.
Really?
Yes, because I think as you get older, the world will tell you, you have to play this game, you have to act this way. As a school psychologist, as Dr. Amber Sessoms, you have to show up this way. You can't have piercings, you can't have your shaved head, you can't have locks, and you have to wear this type of clothes. And you start falling into this game because you want to be quote unquote successful, that you, what I say, you betray yourself. So you're not true to who you are as a person because you're trying to play and fit in. And everyone in this world just wants to belong. Like, that's our goal. I just want to belong. And you said you found friends that make you feel like you belong. And they don't make you feel any different. But we live in a world that makes us feel that there's only one way that we can show up, and that's how we have to be in order to feel safe and seen. And what that does is it really doesn't allow us to be our full selves and our most authentic selves. So the fact that you're recognizing that at the age of 10, and that you've surrounded yourself with amazing friends that don't look like you, but that understand your uniqueness is not a threat. It's just different, and different isn't bad. Different is amazing, because we're all unique and different. And I think that is something that we can take away as adults, that find your people, right? I do some work with my clients where it's this pod mapping thing where you ask people in these pods, the closer you are to the center, they're your family, or they're people that you could really depend on if something's really wrong, like if you're in a crisis or you really need help, or you could tell them your deepest, darkest secrets. But everyone will say, when I ask them, oh, do you have friends? Do you have a community? And they'll be like, oh my gosh, I have so many people in my community. And then when we get down and drill down to it, it's really only a small group, or the hard part is that they don't really have anyone that they could trust. And so it really, right? And that's hard, right? When you don't have anyone that you can just be yourself with, that you can share your deepest, darkest things with, and they don't judge you. And everyone deserves that.
That's what my friends are for.
Right. And I think that's awesome because, mom is all about like, who are these people? Who are their parents? I need to know about them. Right. Side-eyeing, like, let me make sure they're good people, because that's really important, because a lot of our understanding about who we are in the world comes from the people we interact with and our friends. Mm-hmm. And you've done a really good job of picking really good friends. So still surprising to me, because as a youth, I did not feel that way. If I were to answer that question, have I ever been in a space? Even today, I'd say every day. I feel that every day. You're making this face, like, y'all, if you're watching, you can see Emma's face. Every day I feel that. So when I'm in spaces, I scan the room. So I'm looking for people that look like me. So I just came back from the conference. First thing I do when I get there, I'm like, scan. Because our field in school psychology is primarily white women. And we're a very small percentage of the field as Black women and Black men. I don't know the percentage for Black women, but Black men in the field are generally 1% of the field.
1%?
1%. Super rare. So we call them unicorns. And we're kind of like unicorns too as Black women. So you're in a space, it's kind of like when you're in your school or when we're in our neighborhood, there's not a lot of us. Mm-hmm. So for me and a lot of people that are often been pushed to the margins, meaning that we are not often seen, we don't ever see ourselves in teachers or leadership. So it's often hard when we go in these spaces where we are leaders or we do have degrees and people don't generally see people look like us or don't generally believe that we could be quote unquote professional. So I feel like growing up in the 80s and 90s that I was always scanning and always felt a sense of not belonging. And maybe that's why I've been so intentional with you and your sisters about really instilling that in you, that you belong any place you want to be, that just because you're quote unquote look different or you have a different hue of your skin or different hair texture doesn't mean that you don't belong. And so I have a little bit of mom pride right now because I feel like the intentionality behind making sure that you felt like you belonged anywhere, even if you were the only one, it didn't make you feel awkward, it didn't make you shrink. It's so important. So the fact that you're learning that at 10, at 43, like me, you're going to be amazing. So we're going to push out more Emmas in the world like you. So it makes mama happy. Super excited about that. So I think the only thing I want to touch on is that at the conference, we did a seminar on Black female leadership. And I feel like it was a packed house. I feel like it's still surreal to imagine it. We had so many women still to this day, 2 weeks later, sending us messages that it was so affirming to them. One person put on their Instagram story, she took a picture of us at the panel. She said, when everyone looks like you. And she's an older woman. And there's a bit of healing that happens when you're in a room with people that look like you, when you live in a space where you're never seen. So I just thought that was so cool. Mm-hmm. And I still want that for you, right? Mm-hmm. Even though you don't have that, I think it's super important. So can you think of any spaces that you're in where you feel like you're not the only one, where you feel like you can look at other people that look like you? Any spaces that you've been in like that you'd like to be a part of more?
Church and sometimes at school, because there are some mixed people in my class.
Yeah, and you remember when last year I was like, you have to be friends with her.
Yeah, you're like, you have to be friends with her immediately.
So the joke is at our conference, I'm the unofficial welcoming committee for anyone that's Black. I'm going up to them being like, hi, my name's Amber. What's your name? It's not that awkward, but you know what? It probably is. So the scene from Color Purple, I always think about when the sisters are running across the field and she's like, Celie, sister. That is, I feel like is me. I'm running through the field, finding my people and being like, hi. And I remember one year, this Black gentleman was like, I see you, sis. He just put his hand on my shoulder. But it was so affirming to be growing up in an area where there wasn't that many people that looked like me, to be in a space of professionals that look like me was so affirming. So to this day, I do that. Again, I think it's really important for you to have experiences like that. So when you say church is one of those places, and sometimes at school, which is why I'm like, ooh, get to know them And not that you have to be friends with everyone that has the same hue of skin, but what I'm trying to emphasize is that it's often can be a very lonely feeling to be the only one, especially with the student that was new to the district. I think she moved from down south. I thought it was really important for you to get to know her and befriend her.
Florida.
Was she from Florida? She was from Florida. I think her family was in the service and they moved up here. So I just think those things are really important because we know there's strength in numbers, and in a world that's going to try to sort us, the more that we say, I see you and I love you and I support you for who you are, is always going to be important so that no one feels isolated. And another thing someone said at the conference, which I thought was really key, was that if we see one of us that's on the sideline, it's our duty and our responsibility to make sure that we're going and be like, hey, what's going on? I want to be your friend. Because, sometimes people will be like, oh, we don't hang out with her. No one's ever done that? No one? Listen, there's only mean girls happening in adulthood, or maybe not in elementary school. This is typically...
No, not in elementary school.
It's typically middle school. Mean girl stuff starts to really pop off. But I think what's really cool is that right now you're in what's the club that you just started last week?
Club Ophelia.
And tell the listeners what that club's about.
Club Ophelia is about girl relationships and getting along with other girls. And they're all girls and there's no boys allowed. And we just talk about how to have a better relationship with girls.
And there's intention behind it to start in elementary school because, again, by middle school, we start seeing more of these things called relational aggression, even though now we're starting to... You learn that term?
Yeah.
So what did you learn about that?
It's like not including people.
So like I talked about earlier, the kid at the lunch table, we don't go over and hang out with that kid. Those types of things. But that happens in adulthood too. So the point the lady was making at the conference is if you see someone that's by themselves, which is why I'm like, Emma, that girl's by herself. Go talk to her, hang out with her, or get to know her, because it's a really lonely feeling to feel like you're in a room full of people. You ever felt like that? Like you're in a room full of people, or you're in a school, you're in a building, and no one is talking to you? That's a very lonely feeling. And I feel like you have never felt like that because you're so outgoing and you're so loved, but that's not everyone's experience. So sometimes I think we can get really caught up in, well, this is how it is for me. Isn't it like this for everyone? And it's not. So that's why I think it's important, because you have this privilege to be well-liked, to be well-known, that you can leverage that to talk to someone that doesn't necessarily have that same experience. And then you can bring them into the fold and be like, she's cool, she's with me, right? So I think that's really important. That's what the adult was talking about, which is part of what you're going to be learning in Club Ophelia. All three of y'all went through this program, and I think it's a phenomenal program. Okay. So the next question I want to ask you is thinking about the convention again, because I absolutely loved the Seattle convention. It was a homecoming for me. So at the NASP convention, I was surrounded by other psychologists who care about making schools better for kids like you. That's our role, right, in school psychology. Mm-hmm. And the theme for the year was catalyst and action, so that we have this force that we're going to do things to cause action to change the pathway or the lived experience for you, so that you can be a more well-rounded student. We can make sure you're getting the things that you need to feel supported in school, so that you can be a phenomenal leader in our community as you grow older. So these are all part of our roles. We're not just for students that have disabilities. We're to help systems level changes in schools and be like, okay, well, there might be some issues that some students don't feel like they belong here. How can we help with that to create a better, more positive school climate? So those things are important too. So if you could change one thing about how kids feel at school, now you're talking to a school psychologist, so we're problem solvers. So talking to a school psychologist, if you could change one thing about how kids feel at school, what would it be?
Bullying.
Bullying. So tell me more about that.
Bullying because when people bully you, you feel down and you feel unpowered and you feel like you can't do anything and you're just miserable.
So did you learn about the term bullying in Club Ophelia? Because you use some of the language. So you're saying you feel disempowered, right? So I think that's such an important part because bullying is they think they have power over you or they do have power over you and you feel like you can't do anything about it. And it happens repeatedly. So there's so much initiatives that have been done across all districts and all states for bullying prevention, but we know it's still a big issue, which is why programs like Clubophilia or why state legislation and laws are in place to make sure that students don't experience this, or when they do, that they know where they can go for help. Because both people need help. The people that are bullying need help, and the people who are experiencing the victims of bullying, they both need help because we want the behavior to stop, but we have to find out why it's happening in the first place. So I think that's really important, one, that you're recognizing that. Now, so my question as your mom is, have you experienced bullying?
No.
But you just have a passion for it. Have you witnessed bullying?
No.
You haven't witnessed it, but you just know. So why are you so passionate about bullying?
Because people don't deserve to be treated like that. They should all be treated fairly.
You're right. And I think for you, who has neither witnessed nor experienced bullying, that you have this level of empathy that a lot of people don't have. Because sometimes people have to experience it to feel like, oh, I've experienced that, so that's why I can relate. But you're like, no, I just know that it's not fair and that you're a human being and you deserve to feel safe, seen, and supported. So I think, again, that ties into your strength of love and fairness. And because you have that strength, you're operating from that. So I think, again, that Clubophilia is a really good club for you. Some students are in that club because they've experienced bullying. Some students are in the club because they have been the bully. And then there's some people like you that just have a big heart and just want to help everyone. So I think it's a space for everyone to learn and grow together. I think that's great. Okay, so thinking about that you want to create bully-free spaces in school, or that school should be bully-free, period, what do you think makes a school feel like a safe and happy place?
I think something that would help schools feel safe is that people need to be treated right and not get bullied because of the color of their skin and not get treated wrong because they're still a person.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And can you think of any ways that your school currently does that to make y'all feel like you belong and feel safe?
Wait, what's Miss' job again?
School counselor.
Yeah, that's a school counselor.
So we love our school counselors as school psychologists. They're kind of like our cousins. But what is it about your school counselor that makes the school feel safe or makes you feel safe and feel like you belong?
Because he listens to us.
Such an important point. She listens to you. Do you feel like she's the only one that listens to you?
Mm-mm.
But I mean, part of her job, part of everyone's job in a school is to listen, but particularly school counselors, right? If you're having an issue, you can go to her and you can process and talk it through. She also has a really cool room. I think the other thing that I see reflected in your school, which is primarily a white school, is that you've come home and you've talked about, oh, we learned this in school, and it would be things about diversity and things from other cultures. And then when you go into your school counselor's office, she has a sign that says you belong here. She has books that I remember you going in, I think it was first grade when we had an issue, and you were like, we have this book at home where she looks like me. And I think those things help you feel safe and supported in school because you don't just, we call it windows versus mirrors. So if I'm looking out a window, it's not reflecting back to me. I'm just looking out into the world saying, well, this is just how the world is. But if I have a mirror, it's reflecting back to me, wow, there's a part of me that belongs here that is seen. And I think your school has done a much better job since you were the last of the three girls going through to make sure that you in particular are reflected there, even though you're a small percentage of the population, because it's not just for you, it's for all students, because we have to understand we live in a multiracial, multi-ethnic society. And that's the way that we make sure that everyone understands that everyone deserves to feel safe. So I think they're doing a really nice job of that. And I think that is a part of preventing bullying, is that we can see that difference isn't bad. Difference just is. And it deserves to be celebrated, and people deserve to feel seen. Okay, so the next question I have for you is, when you think about the future, what kind of leader do you want to be? How do you want to help others?
I think a leader I want to be is a leader that listens to other people.
Did you say the leader that wants to listen to other people? Because that's wild to me. That's the first thing that you said, was that a leader that needs to listen to people, because I don't know many people that would be the first thing out of their mouth when they think about leadership. And that's probably because of my experience that I most recently was under a leader that wasn't a great leader. And that was one of the decisions I had to make about, I think it's time for me to leave. I remember asking him the question, what's your vision for the district? And he said he didn't have one. And he said he just managed the day-to-day functions of the building. And I was like, that's a manager. So, and had a really hard time listening too. And I think part of listening is that you're listening to the hard things. So expound upon that a little bit, because for you to be like a listener that listens in a world that I work with people and leaders that struggle with listening, I think it's so important coming from a 10-year-old that's like, listening is number one. So why do you think that's so important?
Because if you don't let everyone talk, and if you don't listen to everyone, they will think they're not important or you can't hear them.
Ooh, yes. But doesn't that take a lot of work to listen to everyone? I mean, who has time for that, Emma? You said you would make the time. So she's pointing to herself, y'all. But this is what I hear from leaders, is that when I say, have you talked to people? So one of the questions I ask them is, I do this SOAR analysis. So I talk about what are their strengths, how we talked about our strengths. So what are your strengths individually and as an organization? What are the opportunities? But the opportunities are, what are the people in your community or your staff saying? So that would mean that you have to listen. You have to talk to them. You have to understand what they're saying and then put that into practice to make meaningful change. And that's often the part people get stuck on right there, because they don't often take the time to be in community with them or sit down and listen to what they have to say. Or when they do that, they don't hear great things and it makes them feel bad about their leadership. And then they get really upset and they want to shut everything down. You're making this face again. Is that hard for you to understand?
What?
Why is that hard for you to think about? Okay, I have to be, as this leader of this company, I'm coming in, or this school district, I'm coming in, and I'm willingly going to let people tell me that I'm bad at my job, or that's what I think, or that I'm not leading effectively, or that these things need to change.
Well, first of all, if they say you're not doing that good, then you need to do better, because if you just say the same, then you're not going to have anyone that works for you.
Oh,
because they're going to leave.
They're going to leave, or say if they can't leave, they're just going to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And who wants to work with people that are miserable?
Not
right?
me.
So, yeah, you have to change. And I think that's the hard part, because change is hard for people. And I think the older you get, it gets really hard because you get set in your ways. Think about Pop. How old was Pop? Like 85 or something? It's really hard to change as you get older. Or when you have this power, you think, everything's great, right? What do you mean? I'm leading this multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar company, or I'm leading this school district with thousands and thousands of students. Everything's great. I'm making 6 figures, making a lot of money. And then people are like, it's actually not great. And let me tell you why. And that's really hard, because what that does is it bursts your bubble of thinking that things are ideal, things are great. And then to hear people say it's not great, a true leader, like you said, is going to listen to that. Mm-hmm. Because what I say is that's harvesting wisdom. So for someone to say, here's the things that I'm experiencing as a student, and these are some of the things I do in school districts, particularly even in your district, where the students were saying, I'm being harmed or I don't feel safe because of part of my identity. And giving them the space to be heard. And what the awesome thing about your district was, they said, we didn't know, but now we're going to do something about it. And not a lot of people would do that. Some people would be like, oh, they're just being too sensitive, or they don't mean anything, or you got it all wrong, or that's just how kids are. Your face. Is that listening?
Mm-mm.
So for you, if someone was coming to you, how would you handle it? If I'm coming to you saying, you're superintendent, and I'm saying, okay, well, as a little black girl, or as a black girl in your district, people have made fun of my skin color or my hair, or don't think I belong in these classes because of the color of my skin. What would you say to that person?
I would say we need to write down the people's name, and we are going to have a meeting with their parents and your parents.
You're like, I want receipts. We gonna address this. We gonna handle it. You're not playing any games. And I think that's important, because First, the thing is to believe people when they're telling the truth and to say, I hear you. That's not okay. Let's solve the issue. But also inviting that person that's saying, here's the issues I'm having, to see if that's a good solution for them. Because sometimes we think as adults or people that don't have that experience, we say, this is how I would handle it. And the person's like, that actually doesn't make me feel safe, or I don't like that idea. And inviting them in and being a leader is part of that is collaborating together, right? Working alongside them. And I think that's what you're saying. You're saying listening. So I just think for you at 10 to recognize that, when I literally work with clients on this is my job. I work with clients and leaders that struggle to listen and struggle to do the hard things. And I say I only work with courageous leaders. So to actually be raising a 10-year-old daughter that is a courageous leader and that recognizes leadership is listening. And leadership is not putting on this hierarchy and thinking that I'm better than people. So when people tell me the truth, I believe them, and then I work alongside them to actually make meaningful change. It's huge. So listeners, I hope you're getting that nugget. So if a 10-year-old is dropping that wisdom and y'all are still over here being like, well, I'm the leader, y'all need to listen to me. Literally today, I had a conversation with my friend who said she was having a mediation, which means a conflict between two people. So she's supervising. And the supervisor said, well, they need to respect me because I have this role. Your face. Do you agree with that? I mean, your face is saying you don't agree with that. Why don't you agree with that?
That's a bad leader.
Why?
Because he's not listening to anyone except himself.
Ooh. But this is what I hear from people. It's that, well, I have this role and it's insubordinate, which is a big term for if I tell you to do something and you don't do it, you need to respect me as a leader. And the response was, she actually doesn't have to respect you. She doesn't have to respect the decision that you make. One, because we're adults. But two, I think oftentimes, even my colleague will talk about this, when he starts his class and he was a new teacher in our district, he said to the staff one day, he's like, I have to earn the students' respect. And the staff members were like, what? You don't have to earn the respect. You get respect because you're their teacher. And he's like, your face. You don't agree with that. Do you think you have to earn respect? So even though you're younger than me and I'm older than you, is there something that I can't just be like, you have to respect me because I'm your mom or because I'm an adult? It's not going to work? Why not?
Because you have to be nicer.
Nicer and be in relationship. And the biggest thing you said, listen. Huge. So I love that. If nothing else, I hope that y'all learn to listen. That thing in my office, you know, that plaque that says listen. Because when I was still in the schools as a school psychologist, one of the students got that for me as for a gift because she's like, you always are like, listen. But it's important the students would come to my office because they felt like they weren't being heard in their classrooms. And they would come to me because I listened to them. So just like you said, your counselor listens to you, I was that for students. And I think it's important for students in schools to have at least one person in the school that they feel like they can be heard, seen, and valued. And we know that is the biggest data, or what do you say, data point? Data point, potato, that we know a student is going to be successful if they have somewhere they know that they feel like they belong in schools. And that's really important. And I think you have several people in school, but some students don't. So again, how do we help students that don't have a connection to a positive adult or peer in school? I think it's really important. And you can be that person. Such a great conversation with you today. So any final wisdom nuggets for the good people listening today? As you fix your glasses, you're so studious. What do you have to say for the people?
Listen.
Drag that out. Listen. Because
if you don't listen to people, then you can't listen to yourself.
Oh, you can't listen to yourself. So say more about that, because, I mean, you can't just drop the mic and leave that there. I need you to unpack that a little bit for me.
If you think that you're better than everyone else and you don't listen to anyone, then how do you know that's your true self?
Come on. So it's kind of like people can be mirrors for you too when you're in a relationship, and people can reflect back maybe some things you don't like about yourself. And if you're not listening, you can't learn and grow and evolve and become a better human being. Ooh, that is, sometimes I feel like you just drop the super deep stuff as a 10-year-old that I don't know if people are picking up on. So I'm going to have to unpack that later because that's good. So if you don't listen, you're not listening to yourself. And you're not being true to yourself. And with that, y'all, it's a wrap.
Nuggets.
Nuggets. Emma Nuggets.
All right, and we're back. Listen, I told you she was going to drop gems. I say that every time, and I know I'm biased as a mom, but this episode really blew me away. And I just jotted down some notes because she just said so many things that I'm still going to be chewing on. And some of that is that she talked about that she knows who she is, right? Again, because she knows her strengths. She already knew those before she took the assessment. So again, I'm going to put the link in the show notes about the VIA Strengths Survey. So you can take that as a youth. I think it starts at age 10. So Emma might made the cutoff, or maybe 8, but it starts in young childhood and it goes up until adulthood. So there's 2 different versions of that free assessment that you can take. And I highly encourage you to take that sort of assessment. Or I will also link my favorites guide, which is a free list of resources of books and podcasts and personality assessments, because the more work you do, and again, I was just on a podcast this week for my friend, Dr. Katie Sando, and we talked about authentic leadership. And one of the biggest things for me is that you have to understand you're worthy of doing your own self-healing work, right? And that starts with knowing yourself. So I will link those things for you because Emma is so confident in who she is. And because of that, she has a positive self-identity, and it's that she knows who she is. She has friends that support her and they don't make her feel different. And that really reminded me of how important self-identity is and community and fostering belonging. So even though I am forming a 3D Power Collective for Black women who look like me, particularly because in this moment, breathing. We need a space. We need a healing space. We need a space to just be and feel seen. There is something to be said about people that share an identity with you that creates a level of safety and support. So that is vitally important. So if you don't have that, I just encourage you to really go inward and think about, where do I seek out this community? Who in my circle can see me fully, can love me fully? Can I share my deepest, darkest secrets with? And if I don't have that, what can I do to change that? And part of that might be joining our 3D Power Collective. Part of that might be your local communities, thinking about your local YWCAs, gym membership, your church, a fellowship hall, something where you can find people where you can be your full, unapologetic, authentic self. We need that. Belonging is so key in our sense of being fully human. You think about Maslow's hierarchy. We cannot exist. We don't exist fully without that sense of belonging. So I just encourage you to think about, where do I belong? And the first answer for me is you belong to yourself. And belonging to yourself means that you have to know yourself. So doing that work, I'll put that, again, the link in the bio for my favorites guide. You'll have those personality assessments. You don't have to take all of them, but you'll see on the list, I think I have 3 highlighted, and I encourage you to look at your values, strengths, and needs. And that will help you to really have that internal compass about who you are. So when you're in alignment and out of alignment, so you can be more like Emma and say, I know who I am, right? And I can stand shoulders back, head held high about that. And that when you know yourself fully, you're not being a fake version of yourself. You're not going to draw on fake people. Because when you are fake, you're going to draw in people that are not really your people. But when you can stand in your truth and be authentically who you are, then that energy and what you're putting out, the authenticity, will be matched unto you. So I encourage you to really do that work, and you will see it unfold. It is a beautiful thing that when I can show up unapologetically and all of who I am, that will become who I attract to me. And there's nothing better, y'all. There's nothing better to be in community with people that are not fake, that are not trying to be friends with you to get something from you, or vice versa, that you can just be. It is a beautiful thing. And I just hope and I wish that for each and every one of you. Okay. The other thing we talked about, thinking about the NAS convention again, And Emma, again, highlights when she talked about when she wants to create a world or a school, she wants to rid the world of bullying. And because Emma is so aligned with her values of love and fairness, she is fighting for that, or she sees the injustice in that simply because she's so resolute about who she is. She's so attuned to that. So when you are attuned to what your values are, you will start seeing the things that you're passionate about and gravitating toward those. But sometimes we don't realize what we're gravitating towards because we don't know who we are. But because, again, Emma took that assessment, it makes sense. And part of life, a major part of life, is meaning making. Our brains are always trying to make meaning from everything. And the more you know yourself, the filter that you will get, again, that compass, when you're in alignment, out of alignment, but the filter and lens by which you see the world will become even clearer to you. So again, I can't push that enough to really partake in those assessments and do your own individual self-dive work, because it'll give you a resounding clarity about who you are. And the other thing Emma really talked about, which I loved. Okay, I love this, y'all. My jaw almost dropped when she said it, but we talked about leadership, and I asked her, when you think about the future, what kind of leader do you want to be? How do you want to help others? And she says, I want to be a leader who listens to other people. And I'm like, full stop. Full stop. Because what? Do you know how hard I have to work with leaders on listening? Right? It was just phenomenal to hear a 10-year-old understand that that is bare minimum, basic level leadership. And that is not something that is taught to the degree that I believe it needs to be taught, or it's not valued by leaders as much as it should be, which is why we have workplace culture issues, which is why we have these hierarchical issues within workplaces and organizations where we feel like based on your title, you get to tell me what to do. And I've always struggled with that because I'm like, I'm an adult. And you know what? Honestly, I also struggled with that as a child because I was like, I'm a human being. Why are you talking to me like that? So it's always been something I was really curious about when people that have these titles are talking to their quote unquote subordinates as if they are children. And we need to really change that within the workplace and really have a more shared leadership style, shared ownership and collaboration that needs to happen in leadership. And when I see that transformation happening, you see a shift in the workplace culture, and you can see a ridding of people being made to be machines and more creating a workplace culture where everyone can thrive and not just survive. And it's really imperative. And what Emma is saying is key. So leadership is about amplifying others' voices and not holding on to power. That we have to decenter ourselves, those in positions of power, and center the voices of those that we believe are beneath us or that we believe we have power over. And once we can do that and make that power shift, you will see a huge transformation in how we show up and how it informs how we operate in these spaces. It's really about getting to this place where you recognize that leadership is not about titles. It's about listening. It's about creating spaces, and it's about standing in your truth. And the biggest mic drop of all at the end, when Emma said, if you don't listen to people, then you can't listen to yourself. If you think you are better than everyone else and don't listen, then how do you know that's your true self? Whew, y'all. I don't know if you caught the level of genius that was. Again, bias of mom, but I'm telling you. So here's what I heard Emma saying. The foundation of leadership is not an act of control, but an act of deep awareness and humility. I had to take notes, y'all, because I was really thinking about what she was saying. So not an act of control, but an act of deep awareness and humility. Here's how I see it show up in leadership. So we have our staff take surveys, community engagement surveys, or employee engagement surveys, or climate surveys. This happens also in schools. So superintendents will send this out to the district. In my district, they will do for parents, caregivers, for students, and for the staff. Any type of survey. I've been in these spaces way too often, and 9 times out of 10, the response is, I quote, I don't know what handbook this is in leadership. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. they're never happy, or it's right on the defensive mode when they see scores. It might not even overwhelmingly be negative engagement scores, but they zero in on the negativity and they take it personally. And then what happens? They do nothing with the data. They don't release it to the people who invested their time and energy in being the truth tellers to be really committed to making the organization better. And that is harmful, because if you ask people, we want to hear from you, we want to support you, we value your input, and then you just get silent and they never hear from it again, what happens the next time you want them to take a survey? Or what happens the next time you want to invite them in to do some quote unquote collaboration? They don't trust you. You've completely broken the trust. So I always encourage leaders, if you're going to take that survey, you have to be willing to sit with what is said and to actually be in community, work alongside the people and do something with that information. So that's what I heard from this. It can't be an act of control, but it has to be an act of deep awareness and humility. And then also thinking about, here's another nugget that I heard from her, thinking about vulnerability and the willingness to receive feedback. So again, I was talking about, you get this feedback in the surveys and they shut down. In my work, I come into organizations and I work one-on-one with the leadership team to really say, here's what I'm hearing from the focus groups, from the surveys. And you have to create this space of trust building, because it's hard to hear negative things, because it's often a reflection of your leadership. Just as a parent, if my kids, and you've seen Emma tell me about myself, right? It's not easy, but it's necessary if I want to be in right relationship, if I want to embody what I'm trying to create. I have to be willing to take that heat and to take it in to be a better human and to evolve. So I always look at it as a gift, even though in the moment, maybe I'm not looking at it as a gift, but I give myself some space to be like, okay, what can I take from what was said to honor the wisdom in that and to move forward in a positive direction, to make sure that I'm not continuing to dehumanize and harm people that I say I'm committed to supporting. So decentering yourself again. And then lastly, thinking about another nugget that I got from Emma is, she's reminding us, when we assume we already have all the answers as leaders or as professionals, or as I'm a school psychologist, you can't tell me anything about education and child development. When we assume we have all the answers, is what we say in school psychology, but sometimes don't fully embody, is that we know that parents and caregivers are the best experts for their children. But sometimes we'd be like, I got all these degrees and letters behind my name. I know it all. And you need to sit and listen to me and wag a finger. That's never going to work out well. So we think we have the answers. We're denying ourselves the opportunity to become our true selves. And real leadership is about being open to the wisdom that comes from those around us and from within. So again, harvesting that wisdom and authenticity. I often say, if I can't be my authentic self in the workspace, you're not getting the best of me. And you're robbing your organization, you're robbing your community of all the wisdom that I have. But I'm not giving it up if I don't feel safe. I'm not giving it up if you haven't built trust. And that is really on the onus of leaders to cultivate that, because you have so much within your grasp. And when you're sitting high in your ivory tower, thinking you have all the answers, you are missing out. Even thinking about teachers in the classroom, are you missing out on the wisdom that little Emmas have? Because we think, well, they're little kids, they're little fourth graders. What do they know? They know a lot. And when we listen to them, when we say we're committed to serving them, that also means centering their voices and their lived experience in all that we do. So if there's any nugget, I hope that that is something that we can really do, is thinking about, how can we listen? Emma said we have to be better listeners. How can we honor the wisdom in your own life and the lives of those we say we're committed to serving? And how can we be mirrors to them so that they can see a reflection of who they are created to be? And also, how can we honor the mirrors that are reflecting to us, or some things that we need to shape within ourselves to be better humans? And also thinking about, how do we harvest the wisdom of those people that we say might be different than us, or might be quote unquote subordinates, or that we have this hierarchy over? How do we work alongside them, harvest their wisdom, and decenter ourselves so that we can learn along with them? So I hope that this continues to be a practice for you in honoring what our young people have to say about practicing that. And maybe some of the things that you hear from Emma, you're like, even for me, I don't agree with that. I don't necessarily agree with that. These young generation parents, right? They raising their kids to just say whatever. Think about that. If that's coming up from you, where can you get curious about that and think about, let me lean into that curiosity. Let me lean into this and think that there is some wisdom for me to continue to shape and expand in how I see the world. There's beauty in that. So again, I'm just so grateful for the community that we're forming. I'm grateful for the shout outs. I loved going to the conference because we were in community. It was homecoming, but also because so many people, shout out to our national president and our immediate past president and so many other people who were like, I thought you were going to bring Emma with you to the conference. And I jokingly, but maybe not so jokingly, said, I think Emma and I might submit a proposal to present next year in Chicago for our next conference. But it's just been really affirming to hear from people how these episodes are touching you and how Emma's wisdom at 10 is inspiring you in your parenting, in your educating, in your community building. So please keep that love coming. Make sure you leave a review wherever you listen to your podcast, subscribe to our Substack and our YouTube channel, and we will see you next week. Take care, y'all.